The damp chill of the morning has settled deep into the stones under your feet, a coolness that seems to rise up from the very bones of the street. You move slowly now, letting the familiar rhythm of the path dictate your pace, not rushing ahead of the quiet life that is just beginning to stir around you. The mist still clings low in the hollows where the Via Augusta dips down toward the river, softening the harsh edges of the buildings and shrouding them in a pearl gray veil. This early hour possesses a quality of suspended time, as if the bustling day has not yet claimed its volume or its heat. You notice the distinct scent profile of this transitional moment: damp limestone mixing with wood smoke, layered over the fainter, musky aroma of night animals sleeping in poorly ventilated stalls. It is an earthy, profound smell that speaks of deep history and persistent habitation. Overhead, the mist catches the weak light from the rising sun, dispersing it into a gentle haze that makes every corner feel both immediate and somehow distant. You follow your gaze to where two men are preparing a small cart near the junction of three streets. They do not speak in shouts or greetings. Their communication is conducted through subtle gestures, a hand resting on an elbow, a slight dip of the head toward the cobblestones. One man pulls a length of coarse rope taut between two posts, his muscles moving with the predictable economy of routine labor. The sound of the rope sliding against the worn wood is low and consistent, establishing the tempo for the surrounding quiet. As you draw closer, you observe the cart itself, heavy wooden wheels resting on solid axles, built to endure untold loads over generations of travelers' passage. You notice the meticulous way the axle grease has blackened the stone dust around it, a permanent stain marking countless journeys. It is not the grandeur of the empire you are witnessing here, but its necessary scaffolding, the routine preparation for commerce. The sheer persistence required to keep this wheel rolling, day after day, year after year. Your attention drifts past the cart workers to a nearby fountain. The water flows with a steady, murmuring energy, drawn from some hidden cistern or feeder stream beneath the city's foundations. You pause near the edge and cup your hands to scoop up a meager measure of water. It is cold, undeniably so, carrying the faint mineral taste of limestone and undisturbed silt, the taste of survival. The constant replenishment of this water source suggests an infrastructure designed not for occasional need, but for ceaseless life. The act of drawing water becomes a quiet study in community rhythm. Other early risers gather here, a woman carefully pouring from a bronze pitcher, an older man cupping his hands against the spray while watching the flow rate. You observe their movements, the practiced slowness, the unhurried care that suggests this task is woven into the very fabric of their existence. There is no rush in these actions, only necessary continuity. You walk parallel to a row of small, attached dwellings, their walls constructed of rough, sun-bleached stone, punctuated by rectangular openings covered with wooden shutters. You imagine the lives lived within those walls, the waking and sleeping cycles that dictate the rhythm of this street. The smell of roasting grains from the adjoining baker's shop mixes faintly with the cool vapor rising from the river drain just out of sight. You pass a man who is setting up a small stall, not selling yet, but simply arranging his inventory. He handles lengths of brightly colored fabric, deep indigo blues, and earthy reds, folding them with precise creases. The wool seems thick, almost heavy, resisting the slight breeze that occasionally moves through the narrow passage. You observe the way the morning light catches the nap of the dyed fibers, revealing subtle variations in color density. These cloths are not merely decorations. They represent trade goods, connections stretching far beyond this single town into distant highlands and Mediterranean ports. The man leans over a stack, running a calloused thumb across a fold of deep blue wool. He seems to be counting them mentally, assessing the quantity against an invisible ledger. The transaction has not begun, but the preparation for exchange is already in full swing, a quiet calculus of necessity and value. You continue your slow passage, allowing your senses to absorb the accumulated textures. Underfoot, the stones are uneven, worn concave in spots where countless sandals and boots have tracked year after year. The slight give underfoot, the faint scrape when an unseen root pushes through the paving. These imperfections tell a story of cumulative use. Every stone is marked by history. Further along the path, you notice something small and unassuming, a discarded pot shard near a doorway. It has been broken and forgotten, yet the deep ochre stain clinging to it speaks of meals cooked within this very vicinity, of life's daily sustenance. These fragments are tiny reminders that the grand narratives of empire are built upon millions of such quiet, perishable moments: the spilled oil, the used cup, the discarded pot. Passing a small vendor who has arranged baskets of olives on an upturned crate, you notice the care taken in their arrangement. The black and green fruits gleam with a slight, oily sheen, reflecting the improving light. A nearby scent adds itself to the blend, the sharp, clean aroma of fresh oil mixed with the damp earth from which the tree branches were pruned yesterday. You pause briefly near this stall. You look at the olives, thinking about their journey, picked in countless orchards outside the city walls, transported by donkey and cart, gathered here for sale before being pressed into oil that will feed lamp wicks and cook daily meals. The entire supply chain is quietly humming around you, a silent metabolism of civilization. The initial quietude begins to thin. You can hear now the distinct asterisk clack clack asterisk of wooden sandals gaining confidence in their rhythm as more people begin to traverse the main thoroughfare. It is a sound that grows gradually, layering over the murmuring water and the subtle sounds of preparation. The market is not waking up suddenly. It is slowly inhaling the day. You are drawn toward a cluster of buildings, tucked slightly off the main street, marked by an open doorway that suggests some kind of small workshop or apothecary. Inside, you can see glimmers of color, the deep browns of stored roots and the bright turquoise of spilled dyes. You approach slowly, sensing the atmosphere shift from raw commerce to focused craft. The air here is different. It carries a sharp medicinal scent, a mingling of dried herbs, crushed leaves, and pungent resins. An apothecary, seated on a low stool, works with extreme deliberation. Before him are mortars and pestles made of pitted stone, their surfaces darkened by age and frequent use. He handles the ingredients with focused gravity. You observe his hands, steady, knowing, every gesture economical. The herbs, perhaps comfrey for wounds or rosemary for digestion, are meticulously weighed and ground. You watch the powder puff into existence, fine and aromatic, catching the light briefly before being mixed with a liquid base in a small ceramic jug. This careful process highlights an ancient knowledge system, one where botany was inextricable from daily survival, far removed from grand pronouncements or military glory. The philosopher's question seems to be, what is the value of this careful preparation? It is not gold, it is healing. It is continuity, the continuance of a life that might otherwise be cut short by simple infection or hunger. This quiet drama holds more weight, perhaps, than any spectacle witnessed in the forum. Moving past the apothecary, you notice another smaller operation, a leatherworker. He is stretching strips of tanned hide on a flat wooden frame, flexing and pulling the material taut. The smell here is distinctly different. Vegetal tannins mixed with cured animal skin, a scent that speaks of endurance and utility. You see him dipping a piece of leather into a vat of liquid dye, then drawing it out to inspect the color saturation under the developing sun. His movements are meditative. He treats the raw material not as commodity, but almost as living potential. The early morning light, now fully established, washes over these scenes, illuminating the fine dust motes suspended in the humid air, giving everything a golden sheen of temporary perfection. You absorb the quiet industry, the silent contract between human skill and basic necessity. The Via Augusta is not defined by its sweeping military architecture or colossal monuments. It is sustained moment by this layered ritual of preparation, curing, gathering, and sale. The pace continues to deepen, slowing into a steady, thoughtful rhythm. You realize that the sheer volume of activity has not built up speed, rather, it has deepened in complexity. The sounds are less about noise and more about texture. The low thrum of water, the scrape of wool on stone, the gentle asterisk thump asterisk of beans being dropped into a woven sack. You walk onward, leaving the focused crafts behind you and moving back toward the main thoroughfare. The crowds have thickened marginally now. People are exchanging goods with practiced ease. You notice an interaction between two neighbors. They exchange not coins first, but baskets of freshly picked vegetables, the roots red, the greens dew-kissed. Only after the tangible exchange is completed does a handful of small, well-used bronze coins pass hands. The objects themselves define the transaction, and the currency merely formalizes it. The weight of everyday life settles around you, a beautiful, enduring gravity. You allow yourself to simply observe the collective breath of the town, the slow rhythm of footsteps, the subtle adjustments of shoulder against elbow in a narrow passage, the shared intake of air that seems to nourish the next hour's labor. The day has begun not with a bang or a declaration, but with the persistent, quiet rhythm of life continuing. The cool dampness of the cobblestones where you first set your feet, seems to retain the memory of the night's mist. It is a persistent chill that rises through the soles of your sandals, grounding you firmly in this moment, in this narrow artery of commerce. You begin your slow passage into the heart of the Via Augusta, following the residual patterns of movement left by those who rose before the sun fully crested the surrounding hills. The early morning light filtering down between the closely packed structures is not bright yet. It is a muted wash, a milky yellow that illuminates dust motes dancing in the pockets of air. You move with the gentle, almost reverential pace of someone observing rather than participating, allowing your senses to calibrate to the unique symphony of awakening life. The noise here is not chaotic, but layered, a complex tapestry woven from countless small sounds, the low rumble of a wagon wheel passing over irregular stones, more a suggestion of sound than a sudden impact, the faint rhythmic scrape of metal against wood as someone shaves or prepares an implement, the intermittent coo of some fowl-seeking purchase on a high cornice. These are the sonic markers of routine life, the audible proof that this ancient thoroughfare continues its measured pulse, regardless of empires or kings. As you progress deeper into the flow, your attention is naturally drawn to the weight and texture of the stones themselves. They have clearly seen centuries of footsteps, the steady grind of military cohorts, the occasional heavy drag of slave baggage, the quick shuffle of local merchants making their daily rounds. There is a weariness ingrained in the surface, a polished patina formed by millions of souls passing over it. You notice how the early morning dampness has deepened the coloration of the stones near the base, darkening them to shades of wet charcoal against the paler dust kicked up higher along the path. The movement around you is highly efficient and deliberate. Porters balance enormous woven baskets that seem impossibly top-heavy, navigating the tight corners with practiced grace. They do not stumble, their bodies adjust instantaneously, translating sheer weight into controlled momentum. Nearby, a man guides an ox cart, its wooden wheels creaking out a predictable rhythm, a slow, steady counterpoint to your own measured pace. You observe the way people coexist in this narrow space. There is an unspoken choreography of non-collision. Elbows are angled away from immediate paths. Greetings involve brief, knowing nods that acknowledge presence without demanding attention. You pause briefly at a junction where two streams of foot traffic meet. Here you can perceive the subtle shifts in atmosphere, a momentary convergence of scents, the earthy tang of wet stone mingling with the sharper, more pungent aroma of cured leather and wood smoke. This layered scent profile is perhaps the most telling marker of this place, the blending of necessary commerce with domestic routine. It speaks to a life lived closely, where workshops spill onto market avenues, and the smell of cooking fires mingles inextricably with industrial dust. Your gaze settles on the clothing of those passing by, the simple, undyed tunics, the draped folds of woolen cloaks that bear the stains of various soils and activities. The garments are utilitarian, designed for movement and survival rather than display. You notice the careful way they wear their sandals. They are not merely footwear, but indicators of daily habit, worn smooth in predictable patterns on the soles. This focus on practicality whispers a philosophical truth about Roman provincial life. Enduring sustenance is always rooted in resilience, demanding simple materials and constant maintenance. The early sunlight begins to warm the exposed walls bordering the path. It doesn't merely illuminate, it seems to activate the materials themselves. The ochre plaster absorbs the light deeply, casting subtle shadows that play dramatically with the uneven surface of the ground. These shadows are irregular and imperfect, mirroring the unpolished reality of human existence in a functional setting. You allow your eyes to track how the patches of shade deepen into cool relief, offering momentary visual respite from the growing brightness. Continuing forward, you notice more specific details regarding the small businesses that cling to the edges of the via. Near one corner, stacked against the wall, are amphorae, large ceramic jars used for transporting goods. They vary in color and degree of wear. Some are pristine red-brown. Others are chipped and stained deep green from years of holding olive oil or wine. Each jar seems to bear the signature of its purpose, a silent testament to the commodity it once contained and contributed to the vast network that fed this settlement. The rhythmic clinking of tools becomes slightly more pronounced as you pass deeper into the commercial core. You observe workers setting up stalls, rough wooden tables dragged into place by sheer muscle power, cloth spread over piled goods. There is no dramatic ceremony to this setup. It is a sequence of economical motions perfected through repetition. A man unrolls a length of dyed textile, assessing the color against the muted morning light. The wool has been processed and weighted according to strict regional standards, reflecting an economy that values consistency and quantifiable exchange. This slow procession through the growing crowds forces you into a state of quiet self-observation. You find yourself studying your own breathing, the steady intake and slow release of air, a subtle physical grounding that helps anchor you to the profound slowness of the moment. The act of walking becomes meditative, each step on the uneven stone serving as an opportunity for reflection. The true weight of this path is not measured in imperial decree or military might, but in the enduring ability of its inhabitants to simply exchange goods and continue daily life. You realize that these persistent routines, observed from your passage, form a massive infrastructural pillar far more durable than any transient political structure. The air thickens with an almost invisible blend of dust particles and human exhalation. The faint, sweet smell emanating from a stall selling roasted nuts mixes briefly with the sharper medicinal scent drifting from an apothecary's opening. You absorb these details, the accidental cross-contamination of aromas, as if they were chapters in a complex history book written by local commerce. As you move past the core market area and begin to traverse toward another segment of the Via Augusta, the nature of the crowd shifts slightly. The energy becomes less about transactional goods and more about personal movement. Families pass, carrying small bundles. Laborers walk with tools slung over their shoulders. Older citizens move at a stately, measured pace. You observe how these smaller acts of passage are imbued with routine gravity. There is an understanding here, an implicit social contract, enforced by years of shared space, that dictates respect for the rhythm and the flow. The weight of accumulated daily life settles upon the path, making it feel profoundly vital, yet utterly ordinary. The gradual warming light continues its slow creep, transforming the cool dampness into a more perceptible warmth against your exposed skin. This shift in temperature mirrors the gradual awakening of genuine activity. The opening shutters, the unrolling canvas covers, the steady rise in pitch of conversation and cartwheels. You continue to walk, letting the persistent rhythm of footsteps and the scent of ancient stone guide you forward, realizing that this mundane procession is itself a grand study in continuous human survival. The continuous press of the morning crowds, which had guided you through the cobbled arteries leading to the central square, now gently gives way. Here, tucked into a recessed alcove, shielded by awnings woven from coarse linen, lies a quieter, more specialized rhythm of commerce. This is the heart of craft production, the place where the raw bounty of the surrounding farms finds definition and purpose in human hands. You slow your pace, allowing the noise level to drop just enough for individual sounds to become distinct. The rhythmic tap of an axe, the gentle scraping of stone against wood, the persistent whisper of dye on damp fibers. You drift into the first workshop, a space smelling intensely of earth and tannin. This is where hides are worked. The air here hangs heavy and cool, scented with vegetable dyes and curing resins, a sharp, organic smell that speaks of both decay and rebirth. Before you, workbenches constructed from rough-hewn planks, stacked high with sheets of damp, pale leather. You observe a man bent over his task. He is working on the edge of a large piece of oxhide, using a knife not for cutting, but for smoothing. His movements are economical, almost meditative. There is no wasted gesture, only focused intention. You notice the patina of his hands, thick and stained with various earth tones, blue from indigo, yellow from saffron, red from madder root. These stains tell a deeper history than any monument could. As he finishes smoothing a section, he sets down the knife and leans back slightly, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his forearm. You find yourself observing the leather itself. It is not merely material, it carries tension, the memory of the animal's strength transformed into something durable and flexible. The deep, rich quality of the dye contrasts sharply with the porous white of the surrounding stone. Thinking about this transformation, you consider how deeply woven craft is into the fabric of life here, far more intimately than any imperial decree could achieve. This leather will become a sandal sole, or perhaps a decorative strap for an expensive cloak. It will be essential. Passing deeper into the square, the scent profile changes again, shifting from animal hide to something sharper and sweeter. Olives, sawdust, and pulverized root. You find yourself near a stall dedicated entirely to dyeing materials. The vendor's setup is impressively organized, less like a shop and more like a chemist's careful collection. Jars of ground minerals sit beside bundles of plant matter, roots, bark, berries, each requiring identification and knowledge to utilize effectively. You watch the process unfold. The vendor carefully pouring small amounts of deep blue liquid into shallow ceramic basins, preparing it for rinsing or mixture. This is not just mixing colors. This is a specialized alchemy, an understanding of chemistry derived from generations of observation. You realize that every color, the vibrant ochre used on pottery, the deep purple reserved for elite garments, the subtle greens dyed from local leaves, requires a complex recipe and a specific knowledge base. The vendor scoops up some dark, almost black powder, which you assume is soot mixed with mordant. He grinds it slowly, patiently, using an obsidian pestle against a smooth slab of granite. The rhythmic asterisk shush shush asterisk sound echoes faintly in the confined space. You observe the fine dust that rises, catching momentarily in the shaft of sunlight that filters through the awning slats, making it glow for a fraction of a second before settling back onto the rough stone floor. The intensity of this focus is remarkable. The vendor does not hawk his wares. He simply exists within them, surrounded by the potential of color. You pause to notice the complexity hidden in such simple objects, the sheer labor required just to cultivate, gather, and process these natural pigments. It makes you consider the invisible threads that hold the vast network of the empire together, not the legions, but these careful hands and specialized minds. A short distance away, separated by a narrow passage smelling pleasantly of herbs, is the apothecary's niche. Here, the activity is quiet, almost hushed, embodying necessity in its most distilled form. You notice shelves lined with small, labeled terracotta jars, jars holding everything from dried foxglove to ground myrrh. The air around this stall smells intensely of potent medicinal compounds, a blend that might be grounding and slightly pungent at once. You watch the apothecary arranging his samples. He handles the herbs with immense care, like fragile specimens. When he lifts a small bundle of leaves, you can see the subtle variations in color, some brittle and dark, others still possessing a fresh green sheen. His method for display is efficient, categorized by function or origin, though perhaps most simply by size of need. You observe him performing a minor ritual, weighing a handful of dried seeds on an ancient bronze balance scale. The little metallic asterisk tink, asterisk, as the pans settle when balanced, seems disproportionately loud in the calm atmosphere. It is a sound that confirms measure and accuracy. The apothecary doesn't look up as you pass. His entire concentration is fixed on the perfect equilibrium of the scales, a physical representation of balance, the delicate exchange between ailment and remedy. You sense that this establishment services not only local needs, but represents a crucial link in Roman intellectual life, keeping records of curative knowledge derived from Mediterranean medicine. A few paces further, near where the dust begins to settle more thickly around the curb, you encounter textiles. It is the weaver's corner, or perhaps simply a stall selling finished lengths of fabric. Unlike the raw materials of the dye worker, these goods are already refined. Bolts of dyed wool and linen stacked against the wall in dazzling, muted stacks. You run your eye along the spectrum of colors: soft browns derived from local earth pigments, creamy whites that show the slightest staining near the warp threads, and deeper reds suggesting careful rinsing. You pick out a length of wool merely to feel its texture. It is surprisingly warm despite being draped over a wooden frame. You notice how uniform it feels, not crudely spun, but expertly processed. A second stall displays linen, a material that seems inherently more fragile than the heavy wool. The weaver's granddaughter, perhaps, is unfurling a length of sheer white linen to catch the light. You can see where the individual threads are slightly uneven, evidence of hand spinning combined with systematic industry. She smooths out a wrinkle from the bolt as if it were a cherished pet, allowing you to observe the delicate weave pattern against your fingertips. It is in observing these fabrics that your mind drifts slightly toward the sheer poetry of human connectivity. Each single thread represents a moment of decision. Which sheep provided the fleece? Which root supplied the stain? Which hands spun the fiber and which fingers plucked it from the shuttle? The journey of this cloth, invisible to the casual eye, spans distances from the remote hillside where the sheep graze to this specific point in the market square. As you move past the textiles, taking in their cool, palpable stillness, you feel a shift in rhythm. You leave the highly specialized workshops and return toward the main passage. Yet the quiet lesson remains that monumental civilization is entirely sustained by the accumulated perfection of these small, observed acts. The constant need for dye, the steady demand for sandals, the daily requirement for clean linen, these are the undercurrents of life in the empire, pulsing steadily beneath the occasional roar of a triumphal procession. You walk away from the deepest recesses of the craft trades, your steps settling into the routine rhythm that will soon take you back to the flow of the Vire Augusta. You carry with you an accumulation of sensory residue: the sharp metallic tang of minerals, the soft grit of dyed wool fibers, the faint lingering smell of crushed olives, tangible reminders of how much life was woven into a single day's